So merge queries, which we just looked at, was about adding extra columns for different queries. Append queries is about getting additional rows, so combining them. It's like a union in SQL Server. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to delete my two existing queries and start again. So I'm going to delete my B table, and you'll find that I can't. My B table is being referenced by the A table. It's because of this join here, this merge queries. So I'm going to now just delete A and delete B. So the data that I'm going to be using is in this another folder called monthly CSV files. And if you're following along with the resources that's very near the beginning of this video series, then create a new folder called monthly CSV files, and you've got January and February. I'm also going to create another folder outside of this that I'm just going to call spare. So I'm going to have January and February in this monthly CSV files, and I'm going to move March and April into this spare folder. So all we've got are these two monthly CSV files. You'll see why a few videos later. So now I'm going to get new queries, and you can see all the different ways that I've got of just getting new queries from text.csv. These are CSV files. So here is my January data, and you can see the computer has interpreted it correctly. It's comma-based, could be tab-based. Those are the two main types. It's trying to find what sort of data types each column is based on the first 200 rows. The reason for this is so that, let's say you had a file of 1 million rows. It wouldn't need, in this preview setting, to download the entire data set if the data types are fairly consistent throughout. On the other hand, if halfway down you've got some raw data that will change the data set, then you would need to base it on the entire data set. Generally, the first 200 rows is fine. However, if you've got header rows, for instance, like we had in our previous example, that weren't part of the data type, then you could say do not detect the data types. So based on the first 200 rows, you can see that it has promoted the first row to the headers. If I don't detect data types, then it's not going to, and I would have to do that myself. So let's see what happens when we import January. So you can see it's got the source, its source is from here, it's promoted the headers, and it's changed the types. So we've got date and text and financial money. Right, let's get a second query. Again, from this folder, we'll have it as February, and we'll just import it in. It only contains one row. So what we have is two tables with the same sort of information. Date, subtype, out. 4 rows and 1 row. We want to merge these two queries together to produce an overall. And that we can do using append queries. Again, we can append one query into another, or we can append two queries into one. So I'm going to do that. And here you can see we have got some options. Are we going to have two queries, two tables, or are we going to have 3 or more? So let's just have these two tables, January and February. We start off with January, and then at the bottom we're going to put February. Click OK, and we get a third query, which is the amalgam of these two. Now, if I did it the other way around, and had February first, and then January, I think you can guess the results. We'll have February at the top, and then all of the January ones at the bottom. Now let's get in a third query. So I'm going to now get my March data back in. So I'm going to March and drag that in. So there we go. And now let's delete my appended query. And now I want to have multiple queries appended. So append queries as new. Notice that I'm not offered that if I'm not actually on a specific query. So if I create a blank query and then just delete it, I'm not looking at any particular query. I can't click append query, so just click on one query if you've got that as a problem. So append queries as new, and I'm going to say 3 or more tables. And this is fairly simple, straightforward. Say which ones you want, and say which order you would like them in. And if you make a mistake, you can click the X button as well. So that now puts all 3 of these queries into one. So if I call this the total, or overall, and close and apply, You can see we're making all of these connections. I'll delete the previous visualization. And here we have the grand total. So if I have a matrix and I have dates going across in columns and the subtype going down in rows and the prices going down in values. So let's just drill down. And there we can see we got January and February and March's figures in there. We have combined all three of these files together using something called an append query. And the good thing about this is if we later on have another month's worth, so here we have April, drag that in. So here we have another query. All I've got to do to my previous query is change the source. So if I change the source, so now April is added. You can see it's included there, close and apply. And once it's applied, April comes onto this matrix as well. So I've not had to change anything in my reports, I've not had to change any of the macros, steps, save one, the source data. You might be going, well, that's great, but I don't want to see April and February and January and March. That's fine. You can hide it. So now all of these are hidden. We're left with just the one query. So, append. Append is useful for getting two or more queries together in the same query. So we've appended 4 different queries together. Now, in this current version of Power BI, the computer was able to strip out the currency symbol and change the value column into a number. However, it might not happen on your computer. You might have a previous version of Power BI, or you might be using a currency that's different to the one that's in the text file. And if that happens, you'll see that you can't do sum of out. So let's see how we can solve that problem. So let's just go back in, edit the query, see what data type we've got. And you can see that it is an ABC. It's not being interpreted as a number. So let's change this to a decimal number. No, that's not going to work. You can see all the errors. So what we need to do is replace values. We'll get rid of the pound sign, replace it with nothing. And now we should be able to change this to a decimal number. Close and apply. And now we can change this to a sum. There we go, that's looking better. Now the pound sign is the British unit of currency. You might not have that on your keyboard. So if you're following along and don't have a pound sign on your keyboard, then here's how to get it. Just go to total, go to your source, click on any of these pounds, highlight the pound sign and go to copy, and then now you can replace the value with your paste, control and V. So we're getting examples of how we can cope with data that we weren't expecting to be in the wrong format, but we have now got it into the right format. Just one small thing. What if they didn't exactly have the same heading? So let's change this heading to out money. What happens to our total? Well, you can see we now have 4 columns. So we have out and out money. Out is being used in January, February and April, and out money is being used in March. At this stage, what you can do is use some more advanced M formulas if you need to, or so that it can be combined into one column. We'll have a look at that a bit later. Or if you could, go back to your source data or the query, if that wasn't reliable enough, if you weren't able to go back to your source data, and change the heading. And then we can have a combined version. So you needn't fear too much if the headings don't exactly match. Unlike a union in SQL Server, the append query will add as many columns that is needed to have all of the available data. So that is the append query.